Here's another composition that's going to be a bonus in the RPG music pack. It wasn't intended to be part of it, but I ended up finishing it, so I thought, oh, it might be fitting, even though it's a lot more epic than a lot of the songs that are being composed for that. But let me give you a brief overview. So, the Celtic goddess of the Morrigan, known also as the Great Queen or the Phantom Queen, is a goddess that I usually feel very close to. The Morrigan is not what you might call a touchy feely comforting goddess. She is a goddess of strife, a goddess of the battle. And she has three aspects. The first aspect is Bav, who is known as the battle crow. And her shrieks sow terror and chaos in the midst of armies. But she is also the one who is seen laundering the clothes of those who are to die in battle and who mourns them with a very distinctive keen. And some people equate her to the banshee, the fairy woman, washerwoman, who keens and weeps for the coming death of someone, especially a family that they're linked to. And Morgan Daimler says something very interesting about the Morrigan in the chapter on the Morrigan in Pagan Portals. Quote, or isn't it just that we can feel more comfortable with a goddess of healing than a goddess of battle, even though both deserve equal respect? Because conflict is part of life. Conflict and friction are part of life inevitably. How that gets handled, though, is different and can vary. Whether friction can be resolved, even if it resolves in just a mutual parting of the ways without any further explosions. Nevertheless, because you are alive, you will come into friction with other people. That is inevitable. It is absolutely impossible to think that we're all going to be perfect clones of each other and that we're all going to agree. Um, and of course, there's levels of disagreement. If someone literally is trying to kill you, you can't have a civil disagreement with them. It's just not possible. However, because we have created a culture in many ways that likes to be conflict avoidant, what happens is that a lot of the conflict, the early conflict that might have, for example, signaled that a relationship wasn't going to work out, gets buried and gets delayed up until it becomes a massive conflict with a large fallout. Those are things that, if you follow the Morrigan, those are things that you, in fact, will try to cut off at the quick. You will try to go for the truth. You will try to find what is reconcilable and what is unreconcilable. You will not shy away from that battle, because not all conflicts are going to be negative, and not all conflicts are started for a bad reason. Because again, you know, if you look at all of the historical events that we consider were fought for a good cause in the face of horrors, for example, slavery, the Holocaust, etc. The war itself was horrible, but again, if someone hadn't stood to fight an incoming wave of what was coming, then it wouldn't have stopped, or it wouldn't have stopped until a larger number of people were dead. So those are the things that the Morgan talks about. And Bav, in that aspect, does deal a lot with the mourning, the passing of things that are no longer there. But then you have Macha, who embodies kind of the spirit of the call to battle and accountability. And finally, you have the Morrigan herself, who embodies sovereignty. And sovereignty is the owning of your thoughts, the owning of your soul, the owning of your actions, and never letting anyone take them away from you. Never letting anyone transgress upon your sovereignty, be it your rights, be it your words, be it your narrative. So as you can see, the Morrigan is not a soft goddess, uh, but she is a goddess that I identify a lot with, because, especially in our culture, these are a lot of things that we let slip on the side because, well, for the cause of having a harmonious group and having and getting along with everyone. And we often leave aside the realization that silencing things for the sake of the group and silencing things for the sake of everyone doesn't actually benefit everyone. Because, for example, if you're silencing abuse, or if you're silencing injustice for the sake of the group, all that does is create a pervasive, ever creeping injustice that spreads like a tumor, that takes over everything like cancer. And then it will affect even you, those of you who thought were exempt from that ever happening to you. And if it happens to one individual, it can and will happen to all by that very mechanic. And that is one of the things that the Morrigan warns about. That's also why the Morrigan never, if you read the text, she never fights with weapons. She's portrayed with swords and shields, but she usually uses magic and shape-shifting. She uses her brains and her cunning to defeat her foes most of the time. So 18 months ago, when a certain harsh period of my life began, and essentially my sovereignty and my husband's sovereignty was being threatened, you might call it that way, I composed a piece called The Call of the Morrigan, which opens my Avalon suite for organ. And I also realized then at that point that I needed to write something far more encompassing, something that encompassed her triple nature for both Matcha and the Morrigan. And so this is it's called the Raven's Call, because the Morrigan's one of her shapes is the hooded raven, and that's the animal that is associated with her. And people who follow the Morrigan call themselves ravens. With that in mind, I thought I would compose an offertory, and it took several months. It was interesting because, funny enough, the finale came to me first instead of the opening, which never happens. I don't know why, but it never happens that way. But in this case, the finale is the first thing that I wrote down, and I knew it was a finale. And then it was kind of like an Agatha Christie murder mystery, because that's how she wrote her mysteries. She would come up with the final scenario, and then she would work backwards to find out how you got to the crime. But so yes, so now this is a pretty large-ish composition. It is for brass and strings and a choir. So without further ado, and a wordless choir. Now, first of all, my engraving in this sucks because I was doing so much editing. I haven't cleaned up the score to make it pretty. But I will. When I have the resources to get it to be performed live, I will. But you will notice a couple of things there, such as the fact that there is there's some Gaelic, well, some phonetic Gaelic in certain choir spots. Originally, this was going to have lyrics in Gaelic, but I decided that it would actually be benefit more from more of just a primal vocalization, just unarticulated vowels, and so I changed that. But that's when you'll see some of the text appearing that I haven't cleaned up yet. And you'll also see some of the text on the instruments here and there, because originally a section was going to be sung by the choir, but then I decided that it would actually made more sense to be played by, say, the trumpets or the trombones. And that's why you may see some of the Gaelic still there, because I just simply moved it from there here to there. My composition style is very messy. It's very fluid, and I seldom get stumped But it's also very messy, which is why so many of my scores look like murder scenes until they get cleaned up. But without further ado, here is the Raven's Call.